Good morning.
Hello, good morning, Andrew.
What do you make of this ceasefire agreement then?
Israelis are elated. I haven't seen my neighbors this happy in 2 years. What did the world say about us over the last 2 years? And all we wanted was to get those hostages home and to end the war in a way that ensures Hamas can never take hostages again. Everyone is excited to see the hostages home this week. We don't know what condition we're getting them back in. Eylon Levy is expected to come back partially blind because of untreated shrapnel injuries from his abduction on October 7th. We all saw the video of David reduced to a skeleton, forced to dig his own graves for a Hamas propaganda video. But there is palpable relief that they are finally coming home. Major questions, of course, about what comes next, but everyone is excited to see the hostages home after 2 years of hell.
What do you make of the fact that it took the president of the US to get this agreement in place? Why could Israel not have just done that itself?
Because the president of the United States was able to bring on board Hamas's state sponsors to tell it that it had to free the hostages, Qatar and Turkey. They were intimately involved after 2 years of supporting Hamas in this conflict to help broker this agreement. Hamas had its back against the wall, huge Israeli military pressure, leaving it fearing the total conquest of the Gaza Strip. Hamas's leaders, of course, all killed by Israel. But that military pressure was not alone. It created an opportunity for diplomacy that the president of the United States brought. And notice the genius of the Trump plan, and it's important that we linger on this. It separated the ransom talks for the hostages from the question of the future of Gaza and the day after. He said, you don't get to hold the hostages as bargaining chips. I don't like previous plans which said you keep some for phase 3 to negotiate you surviving this war. All the hostages come out first, and then we negotiate what really, really, really matters for the day after, which is Hamas's disarmament, Gaza's demilitarization, and deradicalization, which are the prerequisites for lasting peace.
You have talked yourself about what the Israeli hostages have been put through by Hamas. We heard from Hugo Bachega, our correspondent, a few moments ago, that there has been scenes of really widespread destruction in Gaza that a lot of people don't have homes to go back to. And then when you look at what happened in Gaza City with the UN, the head of the UN describing it as a man-made disaster, a failure of humanity. We saw all those pictures of emaciated and dying women and children. Did that make you feel ashamed?
The destruction in Gaza is a result of the Hamas terrorist regime declaring war 2 years ago and fighting it from an urban battlefield it had booby-trapped to the eyeballs. I don't think people understand the nature of the war that Hamas unleashed on October 7th, fighting from a network of 500 kilometers of tunnels underneath homes and schools and mosques and hospitals, when it prevented civilians from escaping, when it hijacked aid, when it literally ran a server farm underneath the UN main headquarters inside Gaza City. That destruction is a reminder that the Hamas regime must never again be allowed to use the Gaza Strip as a launchpad, literally a launchpad for invasion and rocket attacks against Israel in future. Does it bring me joy to see scenes of destruction in Gaza? Absolutely not. We never wanted this war. We didn't want it to begin with. But Hamas dragged Israel into an urban war where it had militarized every inch of Gaza's urban landscape, where soldiers came out and said when they would go into a home, the first place they would look for tunnel shafts was inside children's bedrooms. So the Hamas regime must now be removed from power and demilitarized so it can never use Gaza City as a launchpad for missiles and an invasion of Israel again.
The estimated 70,000 people then that died in the Gaza war, most of them civilians, do you just view that as collateral damage then?
Well, nobody would have died if Gaza had not begun a war on October 7th, 2023, when 3,000 terrorists invaded, burned Israeli families alive in their homes, perpetrated barbaric acts of sexual violence, and absconded with 251 hostages into tunnels underneath hospitals in Gaza. Every civilian death is a tragedy. And they could have all been avoided if Hamas had not started this war. They could have all been avoided if Hamas had freed the hostages and relinquished power on the first day of the war. But the first thing that Hamas did after the October 7th massacre was to threaten to do it again and again and to say proudly on Al Jazeera, we are proud to sacrifice our martyrs. Hamas had a deliberate human shield and human sacrifice strategy inside Gaza, where it was happy to bring destruction on the people of Gaza just to make Israel bleed. And that jihadist death cult that governs Gaza, that still governs half of Gaza, that, by the way, you didn't mention this in your report, is conducting public executions of dissidents and opponents on the streets of Gaza today, cannot be allowed to govern Gaza the day after this war, or there will be a next Gaza war. And we want this to have been the last Gaza war because it was horrible enough. Thank you very much.
We're talking about, you know, how you felt that the ceasefire agreement had held so far. What do you think about the longer term then? Because Donald Trump's 20-point plan has been quite widely interpreted as effectively formulating a Palestinian state, which of course you don't agree with.
In the immediate run, we have to get all the hostages out, including the bodies. And the hostage families fear that Hamas is going to try to hold on to some of those bodies as bargaining chips for future negotiations. But according to the Trump plan, there are many stages you have to get through before we talk about what a permanent resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict could look like. The first thing is that Hamas has to be disarmed. But Hamas told Sky News yesterday it won't give up its weapons unless it's to a Palestinian army that it's part of and that it commands. The plan says Hamas must give up power in the Gaza Strip. But today, Hamas is conducting public executions in the Gaza Strip to terrify any dissidents and opponents. And the plan says that Hamas must be demilitarized, and Hamas has never agreed to those conditions. Point one of the plan says that Gaza must be de-radicalized. So the jihadi ideology that meant most of the people there supported Hamas's decision to go to war by burning Israeli families in their homes on October 7th.
Okay, well, you've made that point already. What I'm just asking about is what you think should happen in the future. A two-state solution, or what do you want to see? Tony Blair running a caretaker government in Gaza, which has been the other suggestion?
Well, I want to see peace between Israel and its Palestinian neighbors. And I agree with the Trump plan that in order for that to happen, Hamas must be disarmed, Gaza must be demilitarized, the population must be de-radicalized. We must have reconstruction where people are more excited to build a new Gaza than they are to rebuild it as a launch pad for attacks against Israel, like happened after every previous war. And if we can overcome those very serious hurdles, that is by no means a foregone conclusion, Hamas is rejecting it, then I think there are many opportunities for what peace could look like. But two-state solution, three-state solution, five-state solution, peace is not going to happen if Hamas remains armed, if Gaza remains militarized, and if the jihadi ideology that led people to celebrate October 7th still reigns supreme in Gaza. So the Trump plan needs to be implemented in full now, enforced in full, every step, or this crisis is not over, and there will be a next war. We don't want another war, so the Trump peace plan has to be enforced.
So if you agree with the Trump plan, then that must mean you also agree with establishing a recognized Palestinian state.
The Trump plan does not call for explicitly a Palestinian state, and we can get into the reasons why Israelis think that a Palestinian state would be a disaster, if you want to take the interview in that direction. In any case, that is the end of a very long process that requires things that Hamas is rejecting at the moment. Hamas is rejecting the principle of disarmament. It's rejecting the principle of demilitarization. It is rejecting the principle of deradicalization. And so any long-term solution, that discussion is moot. It's hypothetical if we're still dealing with half of Gaza controlled by a jihadi terrorist army whose goal is the destruction of the state of Israel and that feels vindicated by the decision to go to war. So I think if we totally transform the situation by de-radicalizing the population so they genuinely want peace with Israel and not war with Israel, if Hamas is disarmed, if Gaza is demilitarized, the sky is the limit for what peace can look like. But again, none of that is going to happen. And the long-term horizon isn't relevant if in the immediate run, Hamas remains in possession of its tunnels and its rockets and feels vindicated by its decision to go to war on October 7th and to fight it from inside and under civilian areas in Gaza. That's the most important thing for any peace settlement in future.
Okay, thank you very much for joining us. That is the former Israeli government spokesman, Eylon Levy.